morning. My name is Neetu, and I am here to take you through the soft skills portion of your digital education. Soft skills is a very important part of your academics because it actually gives you the skills to present everything that you've learned over the past 17, 18 years. How to present it well in front of others so that they're able to understand you and get impressed by you, right? One of the very important parts of the soft skills portion is listening skills. And what exactly is listening skills? So how many times has this happened to you that mama has given you a list of, let's say, 10 things to get from the grocery store, and you reach over there, and when she's saying write them down, you will say that you will remember everything. But when you reach the store, 5 of the things you remember, 2 of the things you slightly remember, and the other 3 are generally lost in transition. Were you listening or were you hearing? Let's talk about what listening is. It is hear, right? So, moving on. What is the objective of this particular session? What is it that we're going to learn here? We're going to learn the importance of listening skills to your profession, to your education. Why is it important? You're going to be able to differentiate between listening and hearing. You're going to define the components of listening. You're going to understand the barriers to listening. How is it that we're not able to comprehend sometimes? How is it that only half of the message gets through to us sometimes? What exactly happens in our brains when something like this is happening? And we're going to understand what exactly is empathetic listening. Why is it important? How does it help us become better people, better professionals, better everything? Why is empathy important even in listening? This is what we're going to understand. We're also going to understand how listening skills are very important for your interpersonal relationships. Any relationship that you have with your boss, your friends, your parents, any people, any person that you're interacting with, how can you make it better? By listening better. So that's what we're going to cover in this particular portion. Let's understand now what is the importance of listening. Why do we need to be better listeners? Better understanding of the assignments and the expectations. Of course, if you have been listening in the class, you will be able to understand when exactly do you have to submit your assignments. Does it carry a particular set of marks or not? And you won't be going back again and again to your boss or to your teacher, or you will not be seeking nth hour help from everybody in order to get the details of the subject that needs to be covered. So yes, you will understand the expectations better, and you will also be able to perform better because you heard what was being said, you listened carefully, and you understand when, what, why of the thing better. What is rapport? Why is it important? When we are dealing with bosses, when we are dealing with colleagues, when we are dealing with our own friends, sometimes you must have seen some of the most silent people have some of the largest amount of friends. And why is this so? Because they hear and they listen, and they listen to everybody, really trying to understand what they're trying to say. So people who hear other people deeply, people who actually listen and connect with other people deeply, invariably have better rapport or better connection with the others. Listening is very important to show support. Just doing okay, hey, what happened? That is not showing support. When you're trying to listen to someone and you're trying to connect with someone, you will actually be able to hear things that are said beyond the words, things that have a deeper meaning other than the words that are being spoken, and that is called showing support by listening. Yes, of course, you understand that you will be able to work better in a team-based environment. If you listen to everyone, people will be respecting you even more, because you are able to everyone loves people who gets them. Everyone has something to say. Everyone wants to share something, and if you are that one person who's really good at understanding and listening, you will be the talk of the town. People will come forward and appreciate you and will be able to connect with you much better. Resolve problems of the customers and co-workers and bosses. In my around 19 years of experience, I have seen that by listening to, so I began my career in the sales field, and I had always a win-win situation because of this one skill that I had. I was able to listen to the customers better. When you listen to the customers better, when you actually just listen to them, you will be able to identify the need of that customer. Instead of trying to sell what you have, you will be able to identify that one thing that he needs. And if you're able to address that need because of your listening skills, you will be able to connect with them and make that seal that deal with that customer just because you heard him. And last but not the least, you want to understand the underlying meaning of what the others are saying. You need to understand what is the implied meaning. So let's say, for example, we have to understand the sarcasm behind somebody's joke. We have to understand the difference between a joke and something serious being said. We have to understand whether to be serious at this particular time or just to go ahead and answer abruptly. So we need to understand all these differences, and this can only happen if you're a good listener. Moving on. All right, so let's try and understand what are the components of listening. Yes, listening is something that we have been doing for a very long time, since we were born, of course. But as we grow up, as we grow into adults, there are various developments that happen in our brain, and there is a lot of conditioning that happens in our brain, and due to which our listening can be impacted. So let's say, for example, discriminating the sounds that are being made. So for example, let's say somebody is using a lot of right? What exactly is the meaning of that particular sound? Was it said in a sad way? Was it said in a exclamatory way? Was it said in a joyous way? You have to understand these particular differences when you're listening. Very important thing again is to recognize the words and understand the meaning of those words. Specifically, let's say, for example, when you're listening to a question, when you're listening to somebody explaining something, and if you don't have that kind of an expansive vocabulary, if you don't have that kind of, let's say, for example, those those words in your mind already, you will have a problem in understanding those particular words. Say, for example, in an interview, somebody is asking you something and they have used a word that you did not understand. What is the thing that you need to do? In order to listen better, in order to understand better, you need to go ahead and ask them politely to explain that particular word to you, right? Then you have to understand, when you're hearing something, you have to understand the grammatical groupings of the word. So how is this particular sentence? Is this a question mark? Is this a sentence? Is this an exclamation? What exactly is this sentence, right? So you have to understand grammatically what exactly was meant by this particular sentence. Then we go ahead, and in total what we are trying to understand is the linguistic and the non-linguistic cues both. What is non-linguistic cues? What do you understand by, we're talking about language and we're talking about listening, and listen is only done when we hear words, right? Not really. Sometimes a lot of words and a lot of meaning is conveyed by the body language that I'm using. A lot of meaning is conveyed by how something has been said, right? So, if you're sitting in a classroom and your teacher says, all right, then there is no use of me over here, and she's saying that with a smile, would you really take it as if it was a compliment? Or do you understand the anger or the sarcasm behind it, sit silently and go back to your lessons? And we learn these cues from a very early age. So, linguistic, what is being said, and non-linguistic, the meaning behind that, the body language, the movement of the eyes, how the words have been said, that is non-linguistic. Sometimes listening will also include a lot of experience, background knowledge that you might have about the subject. So, when you're listening to someone, this is specifically for you engineers and for people who have a little bit of work experience, or you know, something that you've learned, you will bring that experience with you when you're listening to a particular problem, when you're listening to a particular situation. And having a little bit of background knowledge will always help you to listen and understand that person's dilemma better, right? Recalling important words and ideas is also a part of listening, and that can only happen if you've listened well. If you haven't listened to someone, you will never be able to recall anything that has been said, right? In the professional world, it is imperative that you are good listeners. Like I said in the previous slide, as we grow older, there are various barriers to listening, and this happens because we grow in certain, this is a very normal thing. It happens to everybody. It happens because psychologically, when we grow up, there are certain elements that are affecting our development. And these cognitive elements shape up our personalities, and they make us what we are. Listening also gets impacted by the way we have been brought up. So, some of the barriers that we are going to discuss over here are psychological barriers. Maybe unfortunately you do not have that much of psychological growth to understand what is being said. Maybe that kind of subject was you were never exposed to that before, so your psychological level of understanding that particular subject is not up to the level that is being shared. So, which is fine. You go back and you read up material and you read up stuff if you really want to understand what was being said. Physical barrier, this is very simple to understand. So, for example, if you are sitting in the classroom for a very important lecture and you decide to sit right at the back of the class, there will be a physical barrier, and let's say there is a lot of questioning and there is a lot of commotion as well. It will impact your listening, and you will have to refer to your notes, or you will have to ask someone else to help you out because you could not hear properly. Then attitudinal, I don't want to listen to you. I just don't want to. I don't have that kind of a time. I don't think you are even capable enough of you know, giving me anything that I want to listen to. Now, that's what I called an attitudinal barrier. It can happen even to the best of the people, because sometimes we are impacted by our thoughts. Sometimes we let thoughts and feelings take the better of us, and it's not at all let's say something that is a part of you all the time, but what it is that at that particular time you were not in a mood to listen, and that can be a very important barrier to listening. Then wrong assumptions. Something that is said about listening is that most of us, we listen not to understand but to answer back, and sometimes we just go ahead and assume thinks before even something is said to us. And that in my experience, I've found that that happens to be one of the most and the biggest reason for misunderstanding. When we listen to someone, when we are trying to understand someone, the worst thing that you can do is assume something about the situation or the person beforehand. So this is one barrier that you might want to work on for greater and more fruitful relationship with everybody that you interact with. Cultural barriers, gender barriers. Some of the times that even India, our beautiful country, has so many cultures and so many ways in which people communicate with each other. So you will understand this better, that sometimes there is a difference in between the way non-verbal body language is projected in one culture, and in some other culture it is taken differently. For example, a handshake between a junior and a senior in some cultures will be perfectly fine, whereas in other places, if you want to make an impression on somebody's somebody's elders, you go to a family, to your friend's family, and you're meeting their grandparents or father and mother, and you come from a family where handshake is okay, but let's say, for example, here in this family, you have to do a namaste, or you have to touch their feet for getting the blessings. Both of them are right, and both of them are applicable in two different cultures. So even by doing that, by this non-verbal communication, you have heard a need of understanding you better, and you have given them an opportunity to make a better impression about you by touching their feet. It's a very simple act, and it takes you a long way with people. So understanding these particular barriers. Then we have gender barriers. Yes, it is true. Sometimes the way women think and the way men think are way apart, and I will not go into the details of the conflicts between these two understandings, but that is for a different chapter altogether. However, sometimes the way we comprehend situation is different, and misunderstandings happen quite frequently. So what is the best way to handle this kind of a barrier? Communication is the only way to handle this kind of a barrier, where you are listening and trying to understand, not assuming anything, just understanding what the other person is trying to tell you through words and through non-verbal cues, right? So don't give up on listening deeply, and some of the barriers are basically lack of training. You were never actually taught, no one actually told you how to listen properly, and in certain professions that can be a real big issue. Even let's say, for example, you become a software developer, or if you become a coder, and these kind of professions, they need a deeper understanding of what is being said. Yes, you will have a lot of lists of do's and don'ts, but in order to understand the client requirement properly, you will have to be a good listener. Bad listening skills, I just don't want to listen. Well, where there is a will, there is a way, and it is from within yourself that you will have to inculcate this skill, so that we are able to have better interactions with the people around us. All right? What are the steps to listening? Did you ever think about this? That there can be steps to listening as well? So let's understand what are the steps to listening. Hearing. Hearing is a part of listening and not the whole process of listening. So what is hearing? Words that are being said. You're hearing the sound, the words that are being said, and that is hearing. Then gets the next layer, which is understanding those particular words that are being said. Acknowledging. After understanding comes acknowledging that yes, you have understood what is being said. In acknowledging, once you've understood what you have said, you use a skill that is called paraphrasing, which means that you're repeating the same thing that is being said in your own words in order to understand the other person better. So, a paraphrasing sentence will always begin with something like, so if I understand you clearly, or what you exactly meant was this, right? So, paraphrasing comes after you have heard what is being said, you have understood what is being said to a large extent, and then you've acknowledged that particular understanding, and then moving on, you paraphrase so that you understand better, right? And then you should go ahead and open your mouth and give a feedback. So, you understand there are 4 levels above opening our mouth and answering someone. Remember this when you're giving an interview, right? Okay. All right. So, is listening enough? What is the difference between just listening and what is effective listening? Yeah, let's go ahead and discuss this further. So, what exactly is effective listening? Is it agreeing or disagreeing immediately? No. Is it solving and fixing some problem? Yes, 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 come on, I have an answer. Halfway sentence, the person hasn't even completed what they're trying to say, and you are going ahead and fixing that problem for them. Trust me, you will not be able to avoid a fight if you go ahead and fix everybody's problem without actually listening to them. And then figuring out something. That is not what you're supposed to do when you're listening. That is not something that happens in the listening portion. What is listening all about? It is just hearing and understanding and acknowledging what the other person's point of view is in totality. That is listening properly, right? Okay. So, let's read this sentence, and what is written over here? I know you believe, you understand what you think I said. I know you believe, you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard was what I meant. And that is the sum total of what you have to do if you want to become an effective listener with empathy. Now, what exactly is empathy? Does anyone here know the meaning of empathy? Let's discuss this. And why exactly is empathy needed? Why is it needed when we are listening to someone? Empathy is the fastest tool to build a connection with someone. If you're able to empathize, if you're able to connect to a person on a deeper level without the words being spoken, those connections will be a lasting impression on this particular person that you just interacted with, right? It wins the trust of others immediately. Empathetic listening, where you're just listening to understand, where you're not giving your opinion immediately, where you're not trying to be the answer of all the solution, all the questions that that person may be having. Maybe all he wants at that particular time is someone to listen to him. Maybe he's capable of finding all his solutions himself, but are you listening? And if you're able to connect that particular dot, this trust is going to be a long-lasting trust with this particular person that you just interacted with. Another thing that is very important in empathetic listening is that while talking to you, the other person is going to feel safe and secure. Because you've already established the trust, because you've told him that I am here to listen to you, because you've just established this particular fact that you're not judging them, you're not coming to conclusions about their situation. So you are safe to go ahead and share anything that you want with this particular person. So when you're listening to someone, it is very important to create an atmosphere where the other person feels comfortable talking to you, safe and secure talking to you. When you are able to listen empathetically, you will be able to create the confidence. You've already created trust. You've already created an environment which is safe and secure for that person to talk about his situation, his needs, or her needs for that matter. And because of that, the person will be confident to share anything with you. And in that particular point of time, you've just won a friend for life. And this is what actually is the difference between mediocre employees and those people who are high performers, or those people who become leaders and managers very fast, because they're able to understand what is not being said, and then they are able to see the picture as a whole and help people around them, right? Last but not the least, the solution can only be reached effectively when both of you understand what the situation is. It is not your solution to give. Yes, you have a lot of experience. Yes, you know things better, right? But the situation is of that other person. You show empathy, you show understanding, you show that you're there for them. But the best way to give a solution is when the solution comes from that particular person and they are able to own that solution. When they see what is it that is there for them in this particular solution, they will be able to act it better and resolve things better, and you will become the star of the show, because you will always be called as a person who's there to hear and to help, right? Okay. So how to become effective listener is a very important skill. I'm sure by this time you must have understood that effective listening is a very, very important skill. Sometimes it is even better than great talking skills. Better listening is going to take you places. How do we become better listeners is something that we're going to discuss further. So give undivided attention. Have no doubt about that. No, you can't be on your mobile and just lifting your eyes for 2 seconds and then listening. You can't be eating your food and then listening, right? When you're listening to someone and when you really see that that person needs to talk to you, or when you need to have that kind of a connection, keep the distractions aside for some time. Listen carefully and listen properly. You are not programmed to multitask. So even if you think that you're really great at listening, with so many distractions, with the TV running and with the mobile playing and PUBG on your phone, I would suggest that if it is something important, you might want to just put everything aside, take a few minutes, listen to that person properly, and that actually is showing a lot of respect for that person. Everybody respects a person who is able to give respect properly, right? Second, but really very important, please do not judge. Be non-judgmental. Why am I saying that is because our assumptions, our judging, whatever we are thinking of that particular person when we are listening to someone will show in our body language. You will lean back, you will kind of give a sigh, and you will shrug your shoulders, and this you will do without realizing that you're doing this. These are body languages. When your brain is getting bored, it will automatically go ahead and react like this, and you will not have a control over it. And there is where your very purpose of connecting with that person is going to get spoiled, right? So be non-judgmental. Do not assume anything about anyone when you're listening to someone, trying to connect with someone. Read non-verbal cues. So specifically when you're addressing someone in a presentation, specifically when you're in an interview, because these are the things that are going to happen to you now. When in an interview, try and understand the faces. So sometimes some of my students will come and ask me, ma'am, how long is it going to be? Let's say, for example, the question, tell me something about yourself. I generally say that you should be able to say something about yourself for 60 plus 120, maximum 180, 3 minutes maximum. Beyond that, it will become a little, too prolonged and people may lose interest. So if your story is not interesting, if you haven't prepared well, you will not be able to make that particular kind of impression. How do you know that? So look at the faces, see if they're smiling, smile yourself so that you're able to connect properly. Very important, and this is something that is a bad omen in any relationship. And this is something that happens whenever there is a fight. Go back and take 2 seconds to kind of recollect if this point actually has meaning in your life. Sometimes we're not listening to understand. In fact, most of the times we're not listening to understand. We're listening to answer back. Before the other person has completed their sentence, we already have an answer at the back of our mind, and it comes out like a retaliatory bullet without even understanding what the other person was trying to say. This has been said to be a cause of many a broken relationships and many a misunderstanding. So from this particular lesson, if you want to take something away, take this point away. Please do not listen to answer back. And last but not the least, because you're not listening to answer back, you are listening to understand. Good? All right. Okay. So now that we have understood that we are listening to understand, this is a takeaway that I want you to get from this particular session. And this is from a very favorite writer that I read. He's a thinker, he's a philosopher. His name is Mr. Krishnamurti, Mr. Jiddu Krishnamurti. And what he says about listening is that when you are listening to somebody completely, attentively, then you're not listening only to the words, but also to the feeling of what is being conveyed, to the whole of it, and not just a part of it. And that, my dear children, is what listening is. Thank you. You can always connect back to me with your questions in the comments section. I'll be more than happy to help you out. Thank you for staying with me.